You're exhausted because you're playing a game designed to never let you win. Tonight, we're not just complaining about the grind. We're going to look at a centuries-old diagnosis that maps exactly how this trap works and the one mechanism that actually breaks it. We treat this constant sense of urgency as a normal part of life, but we are caught in a system designed to keep us running. We are actually playing a rigged game. We carry a weight we can't see, career paths that never feel secure, the fear of falling behind our peers, and a constant pressure to accumulate status and wealth. Modern psychology labels this existential dread. 1,400 years ago, the 57th chapter of the Quran provided a specific diagnosis for this stress. It broke the entire human lifespan down into a predictable sequence to explain why we feel this way. Understanding the mechanics of this verse provides a specific mental framework to dismantle modern anxiety. It provides a way to step outside of the cycle. Every generation thinks their burnout is unique. It's not. The timeline of your anxiety was mapped out centuries before modern psychology even existed. If you know exactly which stage of the trap you're in, the walls stop looking like reality. Let's trace where you are right now. Our stressors follow a documented historical pattern. They are the expected results of a biological trap that has been observed for centuries. Verse 20 maps out the human experience through 5 distinct biological and psychological stages that we all navigate between birth and death. The first stage is laib, or play. For a child, reality is defined by immediate physical engagement. If you take a toddler's toy away, their world collapses because their entire biological imperative is tied to that object. In the teenage years, we enter lao, distraction. The focus shifts to emotional highs and entertainment. We become desperate to fill the silence with drama or media to avoid being alone with our thoughts. We fill silence to avoid being alone with ourselves. That distraction is not our second biological phase fully kicking in. Distraction does not scale forever. Eventually, your brain demands something heavier, upgrading the trap from killing time to comparing worth. By our 20s, we reach zinat, adornment. Our neurobiology begins to obsess over aesthetics. We focus on our clothes, our cars, and the specific way we present ourselves to the world. As we reach our 30s and 40s, the focus shifts to tafakhur, mutual boasting. This is the ego trap of comparative metrics. We define our value by our job titles and how our successes measure up against those of our friends. Finally, we enter takathur, a multiplication of wealth and children. This is the final stage of hoarding resources, trying to build an empire that can somehow protect us from the reality of our own mortality. Building an empire feels like creating security, but it is just stacking sandbags against an ocean. But once you realize the boasting stage is just another temporary phase, it completely loses its power over you. From the toddler's toy to the executive's bank account, these 5 stages provide the blueprint for the vast majority of our modern anxieties. To explain why we stay trapped in this cycle, the text uses an agricultural analogy that mirrors how our brain chemistry actually works. The verse describes rain that brings life to a crop. It starts as a vibrant green plant, providing a sudden sense of satisfaction and achievement. But the green is temporary. The plant inevitably withers, turns yellow, and crumbles into debris. The satisfaction it provided disappears. This is the hedonic treadmill. No matter what we achieve, a new car or a massive promotion, our dopamine baseline eventually resets. The thrill of the green crop always has an expiration date. When we reach a goal, it feels permanent. But within months, that new reality becomes the new normal. The excitement fades, the plant turns yellow, and we start chasing the next spike. Chasing fulfillment from a biological system designed to expire causes modern depression. You expect the crop to stay green forever. The thrill is supposed to die. If you tie your entire identity to something designed to turn yellow and crumble, you will crumble with it. Anxiety is the result of seeking permanent fulfillment from a biological system designed to expire. We are trying to find stability in a cycle of decay. If every achievement eventually turns to dust, it can feel like the world is just a recipe for depression. Why should we bother building anything at all? The text provides an answer through the term metarul gurur. This means deceptive utility. It suggests the world is a set of tools that we often mistake for the destination. The stress we feel doesn't come from having money or status. It comes from worshipping those things as if they provide ultimate security. When we recognize that our lifespan is a temporary transit lounge rather than a permanent home, our internal response to external pressure changes. We gain a buffer against the cycle. A threat to our status doesn't feel like a threat to our existence because we know the boasting stage is a temporary phase. A loss of money is less crushing because we expect the hoarding stage to eventually crumble anyway. We can participate in the world without being consumed by it. It is exactly like playing a game of Monopoly. We can build hotels and collect rent as long as we remember every piece goes back in the box when the timer hits 0. This perspective allows us to engage with life's illusions without letting them control us. In 1957, astrophysicists published a paper proving that the elements making up our world were synthesized in the cores of stars, located billions of light years away. The iron in your blood, the molten core spinning at the center of the Earth, and the steel inside these skyscrapers are not native to this planet. Our sun lacks the temperature required to forge iron. Every piece of this metal on Earth was delivered as debris from ancient celestial explosions, traveling across the void of space before crashing into our newly forming planet. Science mapped this process less than 70 years ago. Yet 1,400 years ago, a man in the desert delivered a scripture that dedicated its 57th chapter entirely to this metal, explicitly stating that iron was sent down. A pre-industrial text made a specific claim about the extraterrestrial origin of a metal, a claim that modern astrophysics now confirms as a literal physical fact. This 3D cross-section illustrates the internal pressure of a massive star. Through stellar nucleosynthesis, gravity crushes atoms together, fusing lighter elements into heavier ones. This fusion creates an outward push of energy, counteracting gravity and maintaining stable equilibrium. But the sequence stops at iron. Fusing it absorbs energy, the outward push vanishes, breaking equilibrium and triggering instant collapse. This collapse triggers a supernova, detonating the star and scattering that iron across the universe. Iron represents the threshold of nuclear stability. It is the point where a star can no longer sustain itself, serving as the physical breaking point of celestial bodies. Skeptics note that ancient civilizations, like the Egyptians, also used iron from meteorites. But those cultures viewed it as a random gift from the gods. They did not possess the physics to understand why it fell. The Quranic text does not present iron as a curiosity, but as a component of a larger mechanical system. It positions the metal's military might as a necessary tool for the maintenance of a social order. Verse 25 introduces 3 requirements for society. The book provides the code of conduct. The balance provides objective justice. But these are only abstractions until defended. This is the role of iron, providing the strength to enforce the law when the balance is threatened. In this framework, iron is the material guarantor of order. Without the strength to defend the law, a civilization's justice system becomes as unstable as a star that has lost its internal pressure. The narrative shifts from the death of stars and the stability of empires to the individual, moving past the cosmos and into the human chest. Verse 16 warns of a specific danger: the gradual fossilization of the heart over time. It suggests that a person can follow the book while their internal capacity for empathy and awareness slowly calcifies. Iron that is heated in a forge is malleable. it can be reshaped and made useful. This is the state of a heart that remains spiritually active. It is capable of being moved and corrected. But cold, disconnected iron is brittle. If a heart remains detached for too long, it hardens. And when it is eventually struck by the weight of reality, it no longer bends. It violently shatters. The Quran suggests that the greatest threat to a believer is not an external enemy, but the loss of their own internal pliability. The final scene takes place in total darkness. The text describes a day of judgment where some individuals radiate a physical light to guide their way, while others are left stumbling in the absolute shadows. Those in the dark plead with the light bearers to wait, hoping to share in their glow. They are told to go back and seek the light they failed to cultivate during their lives. Suddenly, a massive wall drops between the two groups. On one side is mercy, on the other is permanent separation and punishment. This wall does not divide strangers. It drops between friends and family members who lived side by side but whose internal hearts were fundamentally different. Iron is the cosmic limit of a star, the material strength behind justice. Surah Hadid is a challenge to recognize the state of your own heart before the wall falls. The most dangerous threat isn't the world outside. It's the quiet, gradual calcification of your own empathy. A massive wall is coming down, separating those in light from those left in the dark. Check the pliability of your heart before it falls.